Hello listeners, I'm Charlotte and I will be reading Skye McKenna. I'm your narrator for the evening. We will be reading Hedgewitch. Let me just start the Hedgewitch with telling you a little bit about Skye McKenna. She grew up in the mining town of Australia, the outback, surrounded by red dust on the Pilbara. She developed a healthy respect for wild things and wild places at a young age, seeking adventures of her own. She travelled to the UK and fell in love with the British countryside. Well, who wouldn't? Skye now lives in Scotland and works for a heritage charity, with who she recently curated an exhibition on medieval magic. And when she's not reading and writing, she goes looking for stories in the hills and forests of her new home. Hedgewitch is Skye's first novel. Witches aren't born, they're made. I'd like to start with Cassie Morgan. Cassie Morgan has run away after 7 years spent waiting for her mother to return. She flees her dreary boarding school and sets out to find her. But the world outside her school is full of hidden magic, and children have been going missing. With the help of a talking cat and a flying broom, Cassie escapes to the enchanted village of Hedgely. There she will begin her training in the practical skills of witchcraft with the Hedgewitch, who watches over the Hedge, the vast forest that marks the border between England and Faerie. Hedgewitch, Skye McKenna, illustrated by Tomislav Tomic. Chapter 1. The Invisible Girl. Cassandra Morgan was hiding in the broom cupboard. It wasn't a bad place to hide, all things considered. A narrow window provided light to read by, and an upturned bucket served well enough as a seat. If she ignored the smell of mildew and the odd inquisitive mouse, it was almost cosy. Cassie knew all the best hiding places in the school: the dormitory roof, the hedges behind the gym, the unused classroom in the east wing. The broom cupboard had been the nearest just then, when she heard the sound she dreaded most in the world: the horsey laughter of the hockey team coming back from practice. Oh dear. She had slipped into the cupboard just in time, the clatter of sticks and squelch of wet gym shoes passing by, her heartbeat returning to its regular speed. Cassie settled into a corner and pulled a book from her satchel. The dust jacket read Intermediate Algebra, but under the false cover the book was bound in purple cloth, with the title Tales of Faery embossed in silver. The book had cost her a chocolate bar and half a bag of mint humbugs, sweets being the unofficial currency of Fowl House. Cassie had worked hard for her confectionery, doing other girls' prep for months. Yet she would happily have given 100 chocolate bars for this book. It was not at all like the fairy books she'd read, full of dainty creatures prancing about on lily pads. The stories it contained were wild and strange. Youths whisked away by fairy queens and maidens who danced all night in toadstool circles. Fiddlers who wandered into the green hills where they played music for a night, only to return and find 100 years had passed. And children who stumbled upon secret doors that led to cities of starlight. Cassie didn't believe in fairies. Not exactly. She was much too old for that. But she did wonder where the stories had come from. She had looked under 398.4 paranatural and legendary phenomena in the school library and found only a single book on the shelf, Faery and Other Fallacies by A.B. Iffy. According to the author, sightings of fairies could be explained away by unusual weather phenomena or eating cheese before bed. It didn't really matter if the stories were true or not. For a few stolen moments each day, between classes or buried under the covers at night with a torch, Cassie could escape the hockey team, maths, tapioca pudding, to walk in woodland glades beneath the moonlight. The story she was reading just now was about a woodcutter who'd been given 3 wishes by a fairy. Of course, he'd wished for useless things like fame, riches, and to marry a princess. But if Cassie were offered 3 wishes, she knew exactly what she would ask for. First, she'd wish for more books. Our house had a library, but it was full of dull textbooks, and the girls weren't allowed any reading material that wasn't strictly educational. Their teachers argued that students had plenty of prep to keep them busy and ought to be improving their minds with practical, useful knowledge, not make-believe. In spite of this, Cassie had managed to build her own secret library. There was a loose panel in the floorboards beneath her bed, and under it was just enough space to hide a few books. The only problem was that she'd read them so many times she knew the word by heart. Cassie's second wish would be to go on an adventure, like the girls and boys in her stories. Nothing interesting ever seemed to happen at Fowl House, and she was not allowed to go beyond the school bounds. In class she often daydreamed about flying through the window, out over that high iron fence. Once free, she would travel the world, encountering friends and foes and saving the innocent from the wicked. Cassie's third wish was something she really allowed herself to think about. It was her dearest longing, but over the years she had found it harder and harder to believe it would ever come true. The certainty she'd once felt had dwindled to a small trickle of hope. Cassie's wishes, more than anything, was to see her mother again. The school bell clanged and Cassie closed her book and gathered her things. Fowl House was made up of 2 separate buildings. The lower school, where Cassie had lived until she turned 11, and the upper school, where she went now. The upper school was built of red brick and had 4 wings, extending from the main hall like a great red beast, with legs sticking out on either side. All the windows had bars on them, and rumour had it the Fowl House had once been a prison, which Cassie found all too easy to believe. The dining hall was in the centre of the school, the belly of the great beast. Cassie made it just in time to join the queue for dinner. They were served the same thing they had every Monday, mutton stew, a grey mass of watery gravy with some lumpy bits in it, which might be meat if you were lucky. For vegetables they had potatoes, mashed without any butter, so they had a consistency of wet sand, and cold peas. It was an unappetising prospect, but Cassie had traded the last of her chocolate for the book, so there was no question of skipping dinner. She looked for a seat. The hockey team had the best spot, beside the only radiator in the hall. The other girls in the groups or pairs, chatting about their day or playing with their food. Cassie found a seat as far from the hockey team and, unfortunately, the heating as she could get. The 2 girls next to her shuffled away, but Cassie was used to this and paid no notice. She loaded her fork with a lump of potato and steeled herself for the first mouthful. As a junior, Cassie had made a few friends. They had all started together and been homesick for parents and family things. Yet every summer and Christmas, the other girls went home to their families, leaving Cassie behind. She couldn't invite them to stay with her during holidays and wasn't allowed to leave the school and go out to tea with them when their mothers came to visit. Thus Cassie had never been popular, and as the years passed, she spent more and more time alone. She had managed this well enough, kept company by her books and daydreams, until she entered the upper school the previous year. It was then she made a fatal mistake. Cassie had angered the Bleacher. Lizzie Bleacher was the most popular girl at Fowl House. She wasn't pretty or clever, or even particularly good at games, despite being captain of the hockey team. No, a solid girl, with arms like bolsters and a black belt in judo. Lizzie ruled the upper school with sheer terror. It was wise to stay on the Bleacher's good side if you liked the current shape of your nose. It was just part of an initiation into the upper school. You were supposed to put on a brave face and cry later into your pillow. You were not supposed to talk back, and you certainly were not meant to correct the Bleacher on her use of the word dilemma. This act had cost Cassie the last poor remains of her happiness at Fowl House. Before she'd been simply unpopular. Now she was untouchable. To be seen with Cassie was to be added to the Bleacher's blacklist, and she couldn't blame anyone for wanting to avoid that. The other girls would not make eye contact with her in the halls. If she asked them to pass the salt at dinner, they pretended not to hear. No one would share a book with her in class, or even pair up with her in games. If she was going to be invisible, Cassie decided she'd make the transformation complete. So she kept her head down in the classroom, sat on her own during meals, and spent most of her free time hiding. After a while, even the teachers stopped noticing her. Sometimes she wondered what would happen if she disappeared. How long would it take before the school realised? Would they even notice? "Girls, your attention, please!" called a squeaky voice from behind her. Every head turned towards the doorway. The woman standing there had grey hair in a poodle cut and was dressed head to toe in beige. It was Miss Pike, Cassie's least favourite teacher, although at Fowl House that was a tough competition. It was unusual to see a teacher in the dining hall. They had their own common room upstairs where, rumour had it, they ate sausages and bacon for breakfast and sometimes had lemon drizzle cake for tea. Miss Pike stood in the doorway, looking down her long nose at them. "I've come to inform you of that which you will no doubt hear about from your fellow students soon enough. We wish to prevent exaggerated rumours and unnecessary panic." Miss Pike cleared her throat. "The situation is under control and there's no cause for alarm or hysteria. All of your parents shall receive a letter from the headmistress explaining the circumstances and making it clear that the school is in no way responsible for what has happened. The police will visit us briefly tomorrow, and you are not to bother them. If they speak to you, you shall give them your full cooperation. In the meantime, no student will be permitted to leave the grounds under any circumstance. Are there any questions?" The girls exchanged wide-eyed glances. Cassie was just as curious as the others, but unwilling to draw attention to herself by asking. Finally, one of the sixth formers put their hand up. "Please, miss, what's happened? Did I not already tell you? A girl has gone missing!" Well, easy listeners, I hope you enjoyed the Hedgewitch Chapter 1, which I did, I thoroughly enjoyed. And next time we'll be reading Chapter 2, There's No Such Thing as Fairies. Our house was made up of 2 separate buildings. The lower school where Cassie had lived until she turned 11, and the upper school where she went now. The upper school was built of red brick and had 4 wings extending from the main hall, like a great red breast. Skye McKenna grew up in a mining town in the Australian outback, surrounded by the red dust of the Skye now lives in Scotland and works for a heritage charity with whom she recently curated an exhibition on Oh my word.